Have you ever left a room full of people and felt relieved the moment you were finally alone? You love some of those people. You enjoy talking to them. You may even wish you could feel completely comfortable around everyone. And yet, after hours of conversation, something inside you says, I just need to be by myself. Maybe you think too much. Maybe you notice things other people seem to miss. Maybe someone says, I'm fine, and somehow you can tell they aren't. Maybe you want deep conversations, but somehow keep ending up surrounded by small talk. And sometimes you have quietly wondered, why can't I just be normal? But what if the problem isn't that you're too different? What if you've simply spent years judging yourself by standards that were never designed to explain the way you experience the world? Psychology doesn't tell us that these traits make someone superior. It tells us something much more interesting. People differ in how they process stimulation, seek meaning, regulate emotion, connect with others, and make sense of their own lives. And some of those differences can feel incredibly lonely. So today, let's look at 10 of them, not to prove that you're special, but to see whether you've been misunderstanding yourself. You know that feeling. You finally get home, you close the door, you put your phone down, and for the first time all day, nobody needs anything from you. You breathe differently, your shoulders relax, your thoughts become quieter, and suddenly you feel like yourself again. If you've experienced this, you may have wondered whether something is wrong with you. But solitude itself isn't a psychological problem. Research suggests that time alone can serve different functions depending on the person and the reason for seeking it. For some people, solitude can provide space for reflection, emotional recovery, and self-directed activity. The important question isn't, how much time do I spend alone? It's, what happens to me when I'm alone? If solitude helps you return to the world with more energy, clarity, and emotional balance, then perhaps you're not running away from people. Perhaps you're returning to yourself, and there's a difference. Someone gives you an answer. Most people move on. You don't. You think about the answer later. Then another question appears, then another. You don't just want to know what happened, you want to understand why. Psychologists have studied this through a trait called need for cognition, the tendency to enjoy engaging in effortful thinking. For some people, thinking deeply isn't simply work. The thinking itself is satisfying. That's why you may spend hours researching something that nobody asked you to research, why a simple conversation can continue inside your head long after it ends, why one unanswered question can bother you more than it seems to bother everyone else. But here's the uncomfortable side. A mind that loves depth doesn't always know when enough is enough. Curiosity can become rumination. Analysis can become exhaustion. So being a deep thinker isn't about never turning your mind off. It's learning when to keep going and when to let the question remain unanswered. Maybe you've been called lazy, not because you never work hard, but because you can work incredibly hard when something matters to you and completely lose motivation when it doesn't. You may have wondered why pressure works so well on other people, but seems to make you shut down. Psychology offers one useful explanation through self-determination theory. People can be motivated by external rewards and pressure, but motivation also becomes more self-directed when an activity connects with personal values, interest, autonomy, and meaning. That's why money, praise, or approval may not be enough for you. Eventually, some quiet part of your mind asks, why am I doing this? And if the answer feels empty, motivation becomes difficult. That doesn't automatically make you more principled than everyone else, but it may explain why you can't spend years chasing something simply because other people think you should want it. Sometimes the hardest question isn't, "Can I do this?" It's, "Do I actually want this life?" Someone smiles. Everyone else accepts it. You don't. You notice the pause before they answer, the change in their voice, the way their expression disappears the moment nobody is looking. You don't necessarily know exactly what's wrong, you just know something changed. Psychology distinguishes different forms of empathy, including the ability to understand another person's perspective and the tendency to emotionally respond to what others are experiencing. Some people are naturally more attentive to social cues, and if you're one of them, it can feel like a strange gift, because you notice things people haven't said. But there's a cost. Once you become sensitive to the difference between what people say and what they actually communicate, pretending not to notice becomes difficult. You start seeing the tension behind the smile, the insecurity behind the confidence, the sadness behind the joke, and sometimes you wish you could go back to not noticing, because understanding people deeply doesn't guarantee that they'll understand you. Something goes wrong. Everyone starts talking. Someone panics. Someone gets angry. And you become quiet. People may mistake that silence for coldness, but sometimes you're feeling everything. You're simply not showing it yet. Psychologists study related abilities through concepts such as emotion regulation and distress tolerance, the capacity to remain with difficult emotional experiences without immediately being overwhelmed by them. But there's an important distinction. Being quiet isn't automatically emotional strength. Sometimes silence is regulation. Sometimes it's avoidance. The difference is what happens afterwards. Do you eventually process what happened? Do you allow yourself to feel it? Or do you simply bury it and keep moving? Because real emotional strength isn't the absence of emotion. It's being able to experience emotion without allowing it to completely control who you become. Maybe you were young when you started asking questions that didn't seem important to anyone else. Why do people become who they become? Why do relationships change? What actually makes a life meaningful? Why do people pretend to be happy when they're not? You may have felt more comfortable around older people, or simply felt strangely disconnected from conversations that never went beneath the surface. That doesn't necessarily mean you were more mature than everyone else. People develop differently, but some people naturally become fascinated by reflection, identity, meaning, and the deeper questions of life. And when your inner world becomes complicated before your environment does, you can experience a peculiar kind of loneliness, not because nobody is around, but because nobody seems to be asking the questions you're asking. There is a version of yourself you think about. Not perfect, just better. More disciplined, more courageous, more honest, more alive. And sometimes the distance between that person and who you are today hurts. You may look at your life and think, "I know I'm capable of more." That thought can push you forward, but it can also quietly destroy your ability to appreciate who you already are. Because if you're always comparing yourself to your potential, your present self can never win. So remember this, potential is not a debt you owe the world. You don't have to become extraordinary to justify your existence. You are allowed to grow slowly. You are allowed to change direction, and you are allowed to become someone you respect without constantly treating the person you are today as a disappointment. You can do small talk. You smile, you ask how someone's day was, you talk about work, the weather, weekend plans, but somewhere inside, you're waiting for the conversation to become real. You've probably had moments where you were sitting beside someone, answering everything they asked, while quietly thinking, can we talk about something that actually matters? Meaningful conversations can feel more rewarding than purely superficial interactions for people who strongly value depth and connection. But small talk isn't useless. It's often how people create enough comfort to eventually become vulnerable. Maybe you don't hate small talk. Maybe you simply don't want to live there. You want the moment when someone stops performing, when the voice becomes quieter, when the conversation slows down, when someone finally says, "Can I tell you something I've never told anyone?" That's the conversation you've been waiting for. You can sit in a quiet room without reaching for your phone. You can walk without headphones. You can drive without needing something playing in the background. And sometimes your best thoughts appear when nothing is happening. Because when the outside world becomes quiet, you finally hear the inside world. Ideas connect, memories return, questions appear. You begin noticing things you were too distracted to notice before. But silence also reveals something else. It reveals how comfortable you are with yourself. And that's why some people avoid it. Not because silence is dangerous, because silence leaves nowhere to hide. If you've learned to sit quietly with your own thoughts without immediately escaping into distraction, you've developed something valuable. Not superiority, not some mysterious psychological gift, just familiarity with yourself. And that can be surprisingly rare. This may be the quietest sign of all. Someone gives you evidence that challenges what you believe, and instead of immediately defending yourself, you pause. You think. Maybe you say, "I hadn't considered that." Psychology has shown how confirmation bias can make people favor information that supports what they already believe. Changing your mind can feel threatening when your opinions become part of your identity. But when your identity is built around learning rather than being right, something changes. You can say, "I was wrong," and still feel like yourself. You can disagree without needing to destroy the other person's argument. You can listen without surrendering your judgment. Because eventually, you realize something. Protecting your ego and discovering the truth are not always the same thing, and you have to choose which one matters more. Maybe you've recognized yourself in several of these. You need solitude, you think deeply, you care about meaning, you notice people, you experience emotions quietly, you crave real conversations, you can sit comfortably in silence, you question your own beliefs. But none of these things makes you better than other people, and that's important. Because the purpose of understanding psychology isn't to give yourself a flattering label, it's to become more accurate about who you are. Every strength has a shadow. Deep thinking can become overthinking. Empathy can become exhaustion. Solitude can become isolation. Independence can become an inability to ask for help. Authenticity can sometimes cost you acceptance. So perhaps the goal isn't to celebrate being different. Perhaps the goal is to understand the conditions under which your differences become strengths instead of burdens. Maybe you've spent years asking, why can't I be more like everyone else? But maybe that's the wrong question. Maybe the better question is, what happens when I stop treating myself like a problem that needs to be fixed? Because you don't need to become extraordinary. You don't need to prove that you're smarter. You don't need to convince anyone that you're different. You simply need to understand yourself well enough to stop abandoning yourself just to fit into rooms that were never comfortable for you. And perhaps that's what you've been looking for all along. Not a reason to feel special, but a reason to finally feel understood. So if one part of this video felt strangely personal, tell me this. Which part felt like someone finally put your experience into words? Because sometimes knowing that someone else has felt the same thing is the first moment we stop wondering whether there is something wrong with us and start becoming curious about who we really are. Take care of your mind. It has been carrying more than you realize.